My name is Ames Howard. I'm in the second year of grad school here at K-State, and today we're going to look at finding a way to make a more efficient process for running facilities in Manhattan. The first thing I wanted to talk about is look a little bit at the city of Manhattan and its actual facilities. Manhattan is about a city of about 56,000 people, but if you actually look at the regional area and the counties that surround it, it actually serves about 130,000 people. They have about 28 facilities, 13 playgrounds, 3 schools, and 20 shelters. So the city of Manhattan doesn't just affect its direct residents, it actually makes a pretty big impact on the other counties that surround it. It really makes an impact on people's everyday lives. So that hopefully explains why this is important. Okay, so now the question is how can we make Manhattan Parks and Recreations Department facilities rental procedure more efficient? The way I decided to do this is we were going to go and we would look at other cities and look at their processes and the ways they did things and how they did it and made things more efficient to help streamline the process and compare it to Manhattan's. Okay. So the research design was done by 4 methods. One was by website research, where I would go and look at the other cities' websites, which were Lenexa, Junction City, and Walnego. The other option was I went and conducted interviews. I called people from each one of the Parks and Recreations department, and I actually just conducted a very brief but precise 4-question just interview with them and actually tried to get some answers from someone directly in the department. The other was I created a chart just looking at different variables and different ways they had things on their applications when someone's trying to rent a facility. And then the other option was I tried to go out and interview about 10 people who were citizens in Manhattan. Okay. Some of the variables I looked at that helped choose these are, as we look for cities that were similar to Manhattan with a population of 15,000 or more, and Junction City and Walnego are near Manhattan. They're basically competition possibly for renting the facilities, so we wanted to definitely measure the ways that they actually did things and compare it to the way Manhattan did things. The interviews I did, I based it on 3 different subjects. One of them was deposits, the other was commercial use, and the other was political use. Just the more and more we went on this project, the more it seemed like these were probably the 3 most important issues on how to make things more efficient. Okay, so the interview questions I asked were, could you please briefly explain the city's commercial use policy in regards to the renting of its facilities? Do you have a policy in regards to the renting of facilities to political organizations? Do you have a deposit policy, or do you use another method for the protection of your facilities? And what are the steps someone must take to rent a facility? Okay, the city of Manhattan found that 9 facilities mentioned a deposit amount on their form. It can take up to 6 weeks to get a refund. This is one issue that was brought that we wanted to address and maybe a way to speed up the process on how somebody, if they're going to get if they put down a deposit, how can they get a refund or possibly a way to do away with the deposit altogether. Few applications really included a direct commercial use policy explaining it out. They maybe would have a variable, like mentioning one part, but they wouldn't have a direct part on the application explaining it. And the political use, one facility made a direct reference to political activity on its application. Okay, this is an example of the chart I created. One indicates that for commercial use is an example. That it indicates that a comment maybe or if something is related to a commercial policy is down there. So like, let's say that the Douglas Center has a direct mentions about renting to nonprofits, but it doesn't have a direct mention to merchandise. The Douglas Center, for when it mentions nonprofits, it would get a 1. When it didn't mention anything for merchandise, it would get a 0, and that would be a way basically to measure and see how similar and how different all the applications actually are when you go about trying to rent out the facilities. Okay, and this is one thing I saw that I thought was really, really critical. I'm hoping that's easier to read. The Wayfold Pavilion, it's one of the facilities here. It basically asks you to print out the application after you're done, and then after everything's filled out, take it and bring it back to the Parks and Recreation Center. What's convenient about this is it does have a phone number to the Parks and Recreation Center. What it does not have is an address to drop it off at the Parks and Recreation Center. So this is an example of something that would make it just more convenient, more efficient for the customer. They can call the center and get it, but for them, obviously, they would love to just be able to take it and bring it in. So that's just one example of a way we can make it a little bit more efficient. Just look for it to make sure every single application has an address to where it needs to go. Okay, and with Manhattan, all applications were online. I thought that was really efficient. In fact, they were the only city out of the ones I looked at that had every single application online. More and more since things go to technology, that's definitely something that the city would, I would say, is an advantage. But the part that was probably a little bit harder is different facilities have different renting procedures. So it could be a little bit confusing, just like the pavilion one. Okay. The city of Lenexa, actually they take credit cards. They take deposits by credit cards. And one way they do that is they'll take it by the credit card, but then they actually keep the data and they will actually do a refund, and the lady told me that's back on there by the next Monday. That's a lot more efficient, I would say, than waiting a few weeks. So they have somebody who just goes in, does that, and it basically helps them get the refund. Much more happy customers. For commercial use, the event must be approved, is what they told me. The same rates charged to profit and nonprofits, but they do rank both. So it just basically is a situation where if they approve the business or the nonprofit, then they're allowed to do it. And basically, in terms of political use, basically the Parks and Rec director, he consults with the attorneys and then he gets to make the final decision. But in general, they made it clear, usually they do rent to political groups, and they will even rent to religious ones. So, okay, and the rental procedure is the renter must come in and pick up the paperwork in person. That's like I'm saying, that's where a Manhattan, I believe, maybe would have an advantage. It's much easier because then you just go online and get it. They must bring in proof of identification and or a proof that they are resident in the Lenexa area. That's possibly just basically like a piece of mail would be an example with their name and their address where they live on. It would be an example of one they said they would do. Okay, and this was another interesting idea. If we did want to get away from the actual deposit altogether, one application, it was the only application they had up there for parks and shelter for the parks. They didn't make any mention of actually having a deposit, even though they said they do. But what they do have is they have where they ask the person renting the facility also to buy some insurance temporarily for the facility. And so basically they ask, if it says at the bottom, to attach the proof of insurance to the application. So if you wanted to actually rent something out, in the parks area, they would ask you to do this instead of actually using a deposit instead. Okay, and some of the next observations. When I looked at their website, it was just very convenient and very easy to maneuver through and get through. Like a good example is the Ames, I think I pronounced that right. If somebody wants to look and find, like, let's say something to rent out, they want to do a barbecue and set up a fundraiser for a nonprofit bid. All they would have to do is right here where it says shelter facility and amenities, there is the fire pit and grills. You could click on both those options and it actually brings up several different facilities that have those options, and so it literally gives you directly what you need to have that barbecue. One of them was called the Stonewall Shelter, and it's one of the first ones that was pulled up. Okay, with Junction City, deposits also take several weeks. Facilities also must be inspected first before they actually decide to go and do a refund. Nonprofits are allowed to rent, but they said businesses are not. If the Parks and Rec officials approve, they will rent to political parties, but they made it very clear they will not endorse anyone. So, I mean, they kind of want to be able to rent everyone, but they want to be clear that they don't take a side, is what they told me. Okay, and then the rental procedure, the renter must come to the Junction City Community Center. They must fill out the proper paperwork, and if they're approved, then they must come back and sign a contract. Okay, and with the City of Walnego, there are no deposits because their facilities are outdoors. According to them, they told me their facilities are basically a sports field and a soccer field. They do not, so for that reason, they do not have a commercial use policy either. Political events are not under their jurisdiction. They told me the city commissioner decides on the issue. Okay, and then the Walnego, I went and looked at their applications. I talked to a gentleman named Chad Huffenler. He really couldn't answer it, so he sent me to a lady named Kendra Hodges. And what she did was she basically sent me 2 applications just to review and understand everything. It was just for a soccer application and a field application. Like they said, they did not have a commercial use policy. In category 1, you can see they do actually rent to nonprofit organizations. So that's one way of evaluating it. They said on application fees usually range from $25 to $5. And if somebody, like, let's say, does damage to a field, they don't have deposits, but they'll try to fine them $50. And if they do not pay the $50, they just will not rent to them again. Okay, and their rental procedure was the renter must contact the parks office. The office looks and checks for a date on the calendar. They get a confirmation, and renters come to the office to get copies of the rules and procedures. Okay, some of the challenges I found actually trying to just get this information. One of them was conducting the interviews. When I called Walnego and I got a hold of Shed, and he sent me to Kendra, they told me they were at their busiest point in the year. I think they were doing the Tulip Festival, and so we kind of played a game of phone tag with them for a little bit. The other one was really just putting, on the chart, putting everything in the proper category, realizing, what's commercial use and really being able to identify even if it doesn't, just be able to answer it and say this maybe applies to commercial use, but there is no direct response to or comment on commercial use on the application, putting it in the right area. Okay, my recommendations of what I would do are, I would probably follow the Nexus lead and maybe look at how they did things with credit cards and see if that could be an option to where they could turn around and then they could actually, after somebody's paid for everything, after everything's inspected, they could turn around and just do a direct refund onto the debit card. They would get their money back faster, or the other option is you just do away with deposits altogether and just charge an outright fee. Political use, whatever policy really needs to be done, it just needs to be made clear on every single application so people understand. And I would say that also should be done for religious groups if the city chose to actually rent to them also. As for commercial use, both not business and nonprofits can apply to rent facilities, but they should be additional applications. And I would make it just where it's something that they can read and they should absolutely be able to understand and be very clear on what the policies and issues are, and it should be able to be efficient and be able to be applied to every single application. Okay, I'd like to thank Dr. Schaefer for her help. I would like to thank Mr. Estes for coming, and do you guys have any questions?
Okay. You probably didn't research this, but is there an appeals process if say you're like the Kansas or Nebraska one of the public facility, is there like an appeals process you can go through if the city says no, they can't rent you? Because to me that seems like you kind of hitting the free speech aspect.
I think that is why, more than anything, that the city, if they're going to do an application, they need to make it very clear that they reserve the right to basically choose who they rent to, and they need to put that down on an application. That would just be the way I would think about it. They never mentioned anything about a appeals process.
I mean, because my thing is like they could rent to the KYD, they could not rent to KYD, but then if the Republicans want it, to me that just like
That's a possibility. I think more than anything, when somebody actually wants to look at a matter like that, they probably would have an open policy to both of those policies. But a city manager maybe is thinking if kind of an extreme party came along, from a legal standpoint, that's more of what they would want to consult with attorneys about, and they want to own or they want to have the right to reserve future rent. So. Yes.
Was there anything with the city that was using credit cards, like were their fees higher to use their facilities because they have to recoup the cost of pay the vendor companies, or did you not look into that?
They really didn't say anything about like a certain cost of it being any more or less. They just said usually they had a list of things they would put deposits down on. One of them would be like, let's say, an alcohol policy. If somebody wanted to rent a facility, they'd want a deposit for that. They'd want a deposit, let's say, for renting the facility directly. But in the end, after they paid for everything, he said it would just take, we keep the information and we turn around and we give them a refund as long as everything is in good shape. So they didn't really mention anything along those lines. There were just multiple areas with Lenexa where they would put down the deposits. That answered that. Any more questions?
I didn't understand the insurance program that Lenexa has.
Okay, I'll try to explain it a little bit better. On the application, when you go to their website, at the bottom, it basically, they don't make a mention of deposits, even though when I conducted the interview, they said they do have deposits. What they do is they ask you basically to go and I guess buy insurance. I'm assuming it's just a temporary thing. Instead of the deposit for like a park shelter outside, if you wanted to have like a place for kids to play or a barbecue or something, and they ask you to purchase this amount of insurance, and then basically they need an attachment of that showing it's purchased for the city, and that's how they go about renting out their park shelters instead of actually doing
You
deposits.
sure they actually buy the plan and it's not like covered, like they want proof of like their homeowners or something insurance?
I think you can purchase it probably for your own, and they really just want a certain amount of insurance purchased or shown that it will cover this amount of a liability.
So the city has exposure on this? Does the city have exposure on this?
I mean, my question when you showed that,
You want me to flip back
that
to
there's
this
a
one?
distinction between an event and versus say just a typical rental. And they might make that clear, they might require that clarification, because in our 49 different, applications that we have an event process and a special event application, which is different than just a rental. So probably there's a space between those, I would think, because that's a $500 purchase.
Yeah, that's what they had on. I just thought it was critical to put it in here just because they didn't really mention the deposits, but they did mention that. And I was like, okay, maybe that's a possible option. I thought it was something people
Well,
wanted to
it's
see.
curious how different places do, because it always is a concern that there's something that the city, is negligent in, how they have that discussion. So,
I'll be frank, we had the commercial policy discussion and then later sort of added the facilities policy. I felt really confident that other area agencies would have a more clear policy about this. So, and they don't. I think we needed to look to bigger places to get a better sense of what people are doing, but I was actually really surprised that this wasn't better specified at some of these smaller places.
It probably is that second and third document that's in there. For example, our fees are set by a resolution, which is an easier process for us to alter, as opposed to an ordinance. And our ordinances, are strict, city commission approved. We can't vary from those. If you look at some of those applications, they have different references to a policy or an ordinance. And if it's administrative policy, that's when they go to the city managers, and that city manager might alter that. That's caused some of us to have so many different types of applications. I've had a lot of fun using that 49 different applications. Ever since you said that. So our whole department is kind of on my word.
Maybe this would be an idea, like when I looked at your guys' pools applications, generally for the most part, those were the same. I mean, they had basically the same framework, same structure. Maybe looking at different places, like with the park shelters, trying to set something up where they're more similar, at least as much as you can make them. So if somebody wants to go rent those, and then just looking at more of some of the other facilities that are inside, someone wanting to have a banquet and making them more similar. Maybe breaking them into categories to make them.
We categorize the policies, right? So like all of the general ones, smoking, drinking, you know, that could be the same throughout, and then have sort of those separate amendments specific that, so with this one goes this one.
That's what's helped us since creating one, we have 29, because we can treat those facilities differently. It's hard to treat groups differently. And so that's in a sense why we've generated so many different applications that we have. But I hear, very, very much on both of these processes that you guys have looked at, that we think in the department that we know what we're talking about. But then as the community reads what we put out there, it gets confusing. And this is how people are supposed to go about thinking. So an outside review on both of these really helps us a lot. And I really appreciate it. The little that we're going to have some further action with our elected body because we.
The things I was able to review, I mean, there's things there, they're all small things that can be easily fixed just to make things more efficient and easy to do. There's plenty of ideas to do. So, any more questions?